Hi everyone, welcome to a special DIY edition of Cooped Up. It's winter outside, and so instead of doing something that's more practical for the chickens, I decided I'm going to do something that's kind of chicken related, but it's more of a fun, arts and crafts kind of project. Today I'm going to be making a barn quilt. It's kind of a mini version of a barn quilt because generally barn quilts are much larger. I'm going to be making a 2 foot by 2 foot barn quilt with 4 chickens on it. And generally barn quilts are 4 feet by 4 feet or 8 feet by 8 feet. It really can be any dimension you want, but a nice square piece of wood is usually what you're working with. So we're gonna go ahead and do that today. And I just wanted to talk to you briefly about barn quilts. It's an arts and agricultural related movement that happened about 10 years ago, really. In 2010, it started being really big in Ohio. And now, of course, there are barn quilts anywhere where rural communities and agriculture is appreciated, and barns in general. But they're really fun, and I know just driving around the country roads of Rock County, you can see quite a few. And actually, if you're really interested in them and want to see a lot of them, then you should head to Evansville. That little town in Rock County has around 80 barn quilts actually, so you could take a driving tour and see all those really neat examples of barn quilts. But it's really not too difficult to make your own. You just need to do a little pre-planning. Some math is involved, so you'll need your ruler and your pencil and to get your thinking cap on, of course. But once you've got, your pattern, your design laid out, it's just a matter of simply painting what you want to paint. So I'm gonna go ahead and show you how I'm going to make my little mini chicken barn quilt. So the first thing you're gonna need is your piece of wood. And I would recommend a piece of plywood. I have here a 2 foot by 2 foot square of 1/2 inch thick plywood because barn quilts are generally put outside. You could, of course, do this and hang it, in your house if you choose, but I'm going to put mine outside. And you can see I've already primed with a white primer my piece of wood, and I also have drawn out my design. That's simply because you guys don't need to see me drawing out every single pencil line, but I will walk through it so that you can see how I did my design. But it's going to be the 4 chickens, and I put them at an angle like this so that the final piece will actually be hung up and look more like a diamond than a square. The other supplies I'm going to need are, I have my paper template there that showed me my measurements, and I will have that available to you if you would like a diagram and the measurements for my specific design. I have a sanding block and a ruler, which I use to smooth out my board before I painted it. And I have brushes, of course, and I've got some real basic acrylic paints. You can use any paint you want for this. I'm just going with the basic craft paints. I also have some paint markers because I haven't decided if I want to maybe add some extra fancy details at the end or some touch-ups. So we'll see if I use those. And I have my little tub there of gesso primer, which I put on my board first. And that is now dry. And then I use my ruler, of course, to draw out my design. And I also have my little brochure there of barn quilts, which I got from the Evansville City website. It's really a nice explanation of barn quilts and places that you can go see them. And again, remember, Evansville has the most concentrated group in Rock County, but they are definitely all over, and I've seen them all over, and there are some in the Milton area as well. Probably the most important step that you're going to take for making a barn quilt is accurately measuring out your design. A real quilter is going to work with certain dimensions and measure out their fabric pieces and sew them to the proper dimensions so that it turns out and the design looks great. The same thing happens when you're painting a barn quilt. You want to make sure that you're being accurate. So for my design, I'm working with 10.5-inch squares, and that is, I'll try to show you here, this main square that the chicken is in. But I also have to factor in a border. That's why my square is only 10.5 inches instead of, well, if you have a 2 foot by 2 foot board, why am I not doing 12 inches by 12 inches? Because I want space for a border along the edge and a border in the middle, a divider of some sort. So that's why it comes out to being 10.5. But the main unit of measurement that I'm actually using is 1.5 inches. I'm making 1.5 inch little squares. So there's a 1.5 inch square here. This is 1.5 inches. This is 1.5. Of course, I then divided it because I'm making the chicken comb. This beak here is also 1.5 inches this way as well as this way. So you have to picture this as a bunch of little squares, kind of like graph paper, all put together. I just didn't draw all the lines because I don't want those in my design. Because again, here's another 1.5 inches taken out. So whatever's easiest for you, you could go ahead and grid this whole thing out and then erase. You can see I have some pencil smudges on mine, but it's really, 1.5 inches here. There's 3 inches here because it's 2.5 inch squares, and then there are, 6 inches here because again, it's 1.5 inch dimension. So I've got my whole thing drawn out, and I need to decide exactly what colors I want to paint my chickens with. This is a close-up of my pattern that I drew out, and you'll want to remember that if you do design your own quilt or you can't find a pattern of the design you want, I'd highly recommend figuring it out on a piece of paper first. It really helps to narrow down the dimensions and figure out, okay, I need to draw this line and then I'll draw that line. It's a good way, step by step, and then practice it before you go ahead and draw it out onto your actual wooden board. Alright everyone, I decided that I want one of my chickens to be blue. So I'm just using this true navy color, and I'm going to paint the body of my chicken. I've also decided that painting the bodies of the chickens will be easier if I do it first, because then I can decide ultimately what colors I want the borders to be, and if I make any mistakes, I can go over that with the border color. If you are not a very confident painter, or you're worried about getting those lines exactly so, I would recommend using some painter's tape. And once your primer base is completely dry, you can go ahead and tape along your squares. Just make sure it's dry so you don't accidentally peel off your any paint that you want to keep. So that's always an option. I'm pretty confident in my painting abilities, so I'm not going to use tape at this time. I'm just going to go ahead and paint it. I like to use an angled brush, slight angle, because it helps me make nice straight lines along edges. But I'm going to go ahead and paint my blue chicken. So here you can see I've got the blue body of the chicken painted, and I also painted the inside belly part. And that is the same navy blue with just a little bit of white mixed in. So if you ever want to work on a painting and you just want a slightly lighter tone, just add a little white to the color you have. It'll make for nice color harmony. And I've also started on the red comb of the chicken, and I plan on using that same red throughout the whole thing. So I started over here using red there as well. This is 2 coats of paint, so it might take a couple coats to get a nice smooth color block finish, but I like how it's looking so far, and we'll keep going. So you can see here, now I have all of the bodies of the chickens painted. So the next step is I'm going to do their beaks and their eyes, and I'm going to make them all match. And then I need to think about what I'm going to paint my border. Alright everyone, there it is, the finished product. As you can see, I gave the chickens crazy eyes. None of them are looking in the same direction. Thought that'd be a fun little touch. The only thing left to do is to let it dry completely, and then I'm going to seal coat it with a clear coat, and then we'll find a fun place to hang it. Probably next to the chicken run or something. Not sure yet. But as you can see, I turned it on a dime in there. But it was a fun project to create, so I hope you all have a wonderful time making your own barn quilt. And if you do a chicken design, that's awesome. Also, don't forget to check out all the different barn quilts that are around Rock County, especially in Evansville. There's a lot, but there are some here in Milton. I hope you all are well, and we'll see you next time. Bye!